There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Kate, and I'm the Education Specialist here at Harmony Co-op, and welcome to another one of our virtual Zoom class series. We are really excited for this one, and if you have had your produce, you will be too. Jill and Randy from Mary Gardens Farm are going to be teaching us about some gardening basics. I don't know about you guys, but with this spring weather, I really want to get outside and dig in the dirt, and now we will learn how to more effectively. If you can't hear me or you need anything, please feel free to shout out. If you have questions, ask them if you want, verbally or in the Q&A or in the chat, however you like. And I know you guys are not here to see me, so without further ado, Mary Gardens Farm.
Hi, everybody. It's good to have you here. And it's being so nice outside that I know that we're getting planting fever, and we're looking at the ground outside, and it's been beautiful. And of course, the weather coming up after this following week is going to be in the 60s, so everybody's going to get that opportunity to really take care of some soil things. But today we're going to talk about some real basic gardening tips that hopefully you can take with you. And thank you for being here. We're from Mary Gardens, and we've been growing commercially for about 6 years now. And I think we've been organic now for the last 3 years. I always question that because time goes by so darn fast, it's unreal. And as busy as we get sometimes, we sometimes even forget the days. But with the weather changing now and we're ready to drop some seeds, we are going to talk about some basic gardening. And I think Jill's going to talk a little bit about some of the basics of the soil, and then later I'm going to talk about the mechanics of weeding, and then we're going to go into some questions as you need.
Okay, thanks, Randy. As we were talking about this class, we think probably the most valuable aspect will be when we kind of conclude with some thoughts that we want to bring you. And then take your questions and do our best to answer whatever your gardening conundrums have been, or if you're starting a new garden, you would normally have a lot of questions about that. So we see that as being really valuable. Right now, though, we're going to start kind of with square one, which is just thinking about your garden. So just envisioning your garden. Where's it going to be on your property? How big is it going to be? What's it going to take to get the soil ready? All of those kind of things. So placement. We want to start with gardening placement. And I've talked to lots of people over the years who are, charting their yard or charting their space in which they're going to put their garden. Maybe it's even a patio, and you're using a lot of containers. And have been pretty assured through watching the daylight that they're in the right spot and have plenty of light for what's going on and what they want to plant. There's almost a rule of you can never have enough light. So really look for something that is really open to the sun most of the day. A little shade in the morning, a little shade in the late afternoon, evening is going to be okay. But we're lucky in Minnesota that we have this extremely long growing day. It gets longer, through June and even July, August. We've got plenty of sun. So you want to make sure you're in the sunniest place that you can, because that's where you're going to get the maximum growth. If you're shaded, just rule of thumb, the more shaded you are, the less quickly your plants are going to grow. They'll grow, but they're not going to grow maybe as quickly as you'd like. So that's kind of the first thing. Where am I going to put, my garden? And the next thing then, once you get it dug up, you're going to want, or if you're filling containers or even raised beds, you're going to want to think about what's the quality of my soil. If you are just, digging up something from sod, obviously you're going to need some kind of a compost or a peat or a black dirt or something on top of that sod. Over time, you can build soil. So at the farm, we build soil over time using composting, principles, things like that. But if you really want to get going with it and have a great garden from the start, it's worth investing in some kind of soil prep on top of a new garden. And then over time, continue to build your soil. Of course, if you're container gardening or raised beds, you're going to have to bring in some kind of black dirt, a little bit of peat. You know, there are just some options depending on. YouTube is full of information, and you can look at what different farmers are doing, different gardeners are doing, and think about what works best for your situation. So placement, where am I going to put my garden? What's the quality of soil that I am working with, or that I'm going to be, you know, putting into my containers, my raised beds, and then water drainage. So again, if you're growing a garden on the ground, you know, am I in a place where water is going to sit if I get a little too much rain? Or you know, on a little bit of a slope, it's going to drain off a bit. You know, really know kind of the lay of the land where your garden is, and then that'll give you a clue about maybe having to rethink if you do notice, you know what, that is a little low there, and maybe, you know, make a different choice about where you're going to put that garden. Soil health, just in general, you know, looking at like all the different things that I said. You know, I talked about when you're starting gardening, how you prep your soil, you know, is all the difference in the world and how well things are going to grow. But over time, so if you're going to be a long-term gardener, there's so many great ways that you can compost personally in your lifestyle and how you live. You can engage your neighbors and make sure all your neighbors know that in the fall, when they rake their leaves, that you would like to take all of their leaves and keep them, you know, on your property as a compost source. There's lots of creative ways, if you know, whether you're urban or you live in the country, in which you can start to develop your own composting and soil health plan, and build your own soil where you're not, you know, bringing it in from some other source every year. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of water and drainage and that sort of thing brings me back to a memory that when Jill and I were gardening back in Rosa, which we lived, and I was expanding the gardens, of course, and we started growing a big garden behind the shed, and we started planting some things back there. But 2 years later, all of a sudden, we're getting 3-4 inches of rain at a time, and the water's coming up, and it's so deep. So of course my mind goes, we had to trench all of it. So those are things that you want to look at. It isn't always the normal things that you have to adapt to, normal precipitation. It's being ready for the extreme. And with the climate change happening now today, it is better to be prepared for, do I have some drainage to get off my garden? How can I get that water off? And how do I retain it? And that'll depend on some of the mulches you use. If you're really dry, mulch holds moisture. And if you're really wet, it also absorbs moisture. So it balances the moisture content a little bit better too, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can think of where we could shoot off with this, because soil type is also going to, you know, affect how water is held or how water sheds off. And but you know, just for our basic gardening class, we won't get a lot into that. But I just have to say this, Randy, you reminded me, yes, when we lived in Rosa, we were known for having big gardens, and about every year Randy would add, you know, another part of the garden, or just create a whole brand new garden behind the shed. It was the year he came to me one spring and he said, you know, Jill, he said, because he had run out of room, he said, I'm thinking about tilling up the front yard right over there so we can plant zucchini. And I was like, okay, now we have to find a farm that has at least 20 to 48 acres, because this guy, I'm not going to have a yard left by the time he's done. So that's kind of funny. All right.
Yeah, you know, and one of the other things that always comes to mind when everybody gardens, and we all talk about it, is how to control weeds, how to work with weeds. And a lot of things, you know, we want to keep our garden clean. We can't allow weeds to overtake them. But in certain areas that you're not growing, it could actually be used as a cover crop. Weeds are a great cover crop. Like Jill and I at home now, we grow commercially. And in between rows, we will actually let the weeds grow. And then
I'm going to, a caveat for those of you who kind of are starting to shake when he says let the weeds grow. Don't let them grow to the point where they start to seed.
I was just going to say that.
Okay.
We mow them down, we keep them low. But in regular gardening, there's mechanical ways to take care of weeding, and you can use a lot of tools. I mean, there are as many tools out there as you can about dream of. And one of my favorite tools is the stirrup hoe and the wire hoe, particularly for lettuces and fine things you can get in and around. Also, there's a little bit of, when you plant your plants and they start coming up about this high, you can still use like what we call a tine rake. And that kind of breaks up that first seed that starts to germinate, that weed seed. And that breaks it up. And the tine weeder is very important. Although you might pull a very minute amount of plants out, it still will help you with weeding over the long run. There are other ways to control weeds. And one of the things that we're using now on our farm, but I would also use, if I knew what I knew now just on a regular garden, that would be the pyro weeder, which is a flame burner. So, you know, you can plant for example, you can plant your carrots, and you can wait about 8 to 10 days now, depending on how warm it is and how moist it is. But 8 to 10 days, you can go ahead and burn that row again. And what you're going to do is take care of those, particularly those annuals that are coming up. And that will be immense help, because as soon as you get the carrots up, and if they can beat the weeds, then of course you can actually run your stir pole, and you can see you're not covering them, you're not covering the new germination up, covering it with dirt. And that makes a world of difference. Now, the other thing that people use and have been using now is tarping. So a lot of times, you know, you can actually take your soil, depending on what type of the year it is, you can actually take and cover whatever you decide to type or tarp. We're using a lot of silage tarps. You can use landscaping fabric, and if you cover that for 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to kill, particularly you're going to kill a lot of the annuals. Now you're still going to have trouble with your perennials, because those are your, for example, that would be your Canadian thistle. You want to dig that quackgrass. Now there's some tricks to the Canadian thistle. If you let it grow up 3-4 feet and cut it off at about 6 inches before it rains, you can actually start to get rid of them as well. But we have used the tarping, and it is fairly effective. And the other thing that goes along with a lot of the no-till things that are going on today. And no-till is really about planting without disturbing the soil. And they use tarps. So for example, if you're growing cabbage or some kind of brassica or lettuce, once that's been harvested, you'll bring the tarp over it and you'll allow that to die. Now, most gardeners they grow one time. We grow a lot of succession. So you give it a few weeks, and that will tremendously kill these weeds. And if you leave it on there, and you come back the next year, you can take a broad fork, go down, break it up, not lift the dirt up, but just break it up and allow some aeration. You can go ahead and plant again. And we find, you know, I've watched thousands of YouTubes on it, and I really see that's probably the way gardeners are going to go, because it's a great way of controlling weeds. It's amending the soil, because you're allowing that soil physiology to take place underneath. And we know that as long as you keep that biology intact, everything's going to work symbiotically, meaning that that old weed with the roots is going to be helping the new root. They work together, and we find that that's a great way to actually control weeds. And the other thing about weeding that's really important, so if you have, for example, if you have your row of carrots and things are coming up and they're starting to grow, they're probably 1/3 of the way through the season, is you get a rain, and as soon as it's dry, even though there's no weeds, take that stir pole and lightly go across the top. Don't dig deep, but just go right across the top. You're again breaking up that fine weed that's just beginning the sprout. And when you do that, I call it, in the front end, taking care of it helps so much in the back end, and that's one of our sayings. And we know when we've lost control is when we're doing it all in the back end. And then of course, I always say that every time a weed grows, every day, it doubles. And also then it's 10 times more the labor. So if you can do it right away, it's so important. And that's kind of the weeding is. And again, if you talk to 10 different people, you'll have kind of 10 different ideas on how to control weeds. And you know, there's probably 20 different ways to grow carrots and how to get them up without weeds. And everything is done kind of what works for you. But if you can take few things, and let's say you're gonna change for the next year, go ahead, go the same way as you always have, but try something a little bit different and see how that works. Gardening is one of the toughest things that we talk about is we learn something and we really can't apply it until the next year. And I'm sure it is that way with everybody. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, just that as I hear you talk, and this makes sense to me, but I speak intense gardening now, where when we were home gardeners, we had very large gardens, but we didn't look at things quite this intensely. And so I feel like we've thrown a lot of information at you. So if you took a note or you're like, what did he say? What kind of hole is that? That's something you can ask us about at the end, and we can clarify and maybe go into some of that a little bit more deeply. We're just kind of giving you an overview of some options for weeding, and there's just so many methods. And again, YouTube is your best friend when it comes to gardening. There's so much cool creative gardening going on right now, and creative growing. This next generation that's coming up, they are full of really cool ideas. And not disturbing the soil or lightly disturbing the soil is definitely one of the themes for the next generation of gardening and farming. And even those of us who are concerned about soil health, as certified organic growers, we've always been concerned about that. And there's just so many more conferences, even in chemical agriculture now. We're seeing more conferences and more workshops on soil health. So, yeah.
And one of the things that I probably forgot to mention, you talk about no-till, but one of the standards of no-till is they're using a lot of what we call a 30-inch bed. And we're probably getting as many rows in there as possible, depending on your crop now and how they grow. Certain things you need more space. But the reason for that is when you get foliage, you're actually tarping the ground so you don't get weed production once they reach a certain level of maturity. So that's another advantage of actually doing the tarping and the approximation of how close you run your crop.
Yeah, there's canopy, so kind of canopy gardening, I guess you could say. So there's actually, again, if you YouTube and you want to try this out, so there's more intensive gardening. I know us growing up on the farm, my grandma's 99 years old, and she probably could still pick blueberry pick me. She's amazing. I learned a lot from her, a lot from my mom. But it was rows of vegetables, so far apart, and you weeded in between, and that's just the way it was. But I would say 100 years before that, or 200 years before that, it wasn't like that. It was more intensive. So things were planted a lot closer together, and there was thought about, okay, if I'm going to plant lettuce here, I could grow broccoli right next to it because it's going to provide a bit of a canopy. So when I talked about sun, all the plants want sun, but some plants don't like heat. So lettuce is one of those. It doesn't like much heat. So you can actually strategically plant lettuce with a plant next to a plant that's going to grow tall. So we can provide it, and plant it to the, south or the west. So it's going to provide, shade for some of the day. Or maybe it's next to some trellised cucumbers or something. So planting more intensely can provide you the opportunity to maybe do less weeding between rows, and it's kind of like companion planting, except that can be one of your strategic things in how you plant.
And space.
And
if
space.
You're limited with space, it makes a world of difference. And,
Yeah.
We were fortunate enough to be able to work with a horticulture branch. But anyway, he taught us quite a bit about companion growing, but with our mega growing, it's really hard to do. But with a small garden, again, there's certain crops that grow really well with each other. And again, YouTube's a great source of, well, I want to grow peas with this, or I want to grow carrots with this. And you'll find that really works well because they work together and they enhance each other's growth. And I think that's important.
And that kind of brings us into the next thing we just wanted to kind of cover generally is pests. So along with companion planting, so pests, I'm talking about bugs, so cutworm, root maggot, flea beetles, cabbage moths, those are the ones that we're always kind of, in the ring with every summer. And but I want to mention this. So companion planting for growing, companion planting for creating an environment for particular plants like the lettuce and the broccoli, but also planting to bring in beneficial insects that actually are a predator to some of those pests, that are bothering your vegetables. So for instance, another thing we learned from Michelle Strand was there's a beneficial wasp that will eat your cabbage moth, and you attract them in through dill. They come in with they want to get nectar, whatever they do with the dill, it brings in this beneficial wasp. And so we've got a 200-foot row of broccoli, a 200-foot row of Brussels, 200-foot row of pretty much everything. But with all of the brassicas, where I know we're going to get the cabbage moth, I go along and I poke holes every so long. I don't know how far it is. I've got one of those kind of standing planters. So I just go along the row and I just drop in dill seed. I've got a huge bag of saved dill seed. And I just drop it in those holes. And so while the broccoli is growing, or the cauliflower, the cabbage, the Brussels, any brassica, while they're growing, so is my dill. So I've got all of this dill growing, and sure enough, I will have the wasps coming in. So we're doing our best to kind of learn about those things as well. Yeah. And even some gardeners, at least on a commercial scale, but you can do it at home scale too. I think the more home gardeners that do this, the better. Literally plant a hedgerow of something that's going to come up every year next to your garden or in your yard somewhere, that the plants are designed to bring in those beneficial insects, because that's going to help what's going on in your garden as far as the insects you don't want. So.
And of course, there's a lot of biologics out there that can help you with these pests too. Starting with some simple things like diatomaceous earth. It's very much of a deterrent. It isn't absolutely a killer, but it will keep certain worms and certain insects off your plants. And all you need to do is just sprinkle some powder on some plants, and particularly around the roots, or around the stems as well, because that helps your cutworm. Now, cutworms are a little more difficult, but it'll help the root maggot, and it actually deters some of the cabbage moth. But we also use what's called spinosad, and we actually pick it up locally over in Bagley at Mark's Hardware. It's called Oregano Beater, and it carries spinosad, and it's been approved by MOSA, that's our certifier. And we have really good success with that. We use it for the potatoes themselves, the potato bugs, but we also use it for the cabbage moth. And I have used it on food beetles. However, it's not quite as effective as such as pyrethrin, which is derived from the African daisy plant. And that is really quite effective. Now, these things don't absolutely kill things right away. The pyrethrin will actually work with the nervous system. It kind of shuts them down, and it doesn't allow the nervous system, which they can't function. And it's the same thing with the spinosad. That absolutely does kill them over a few days, and we've had great success killing the potato bug and the cabbage moth. But then there's also BT, which is another form of bacteria that's used specifically for the cabbage moth worm, and we find that works pretty well too. I'm trying to think of what else we use.
Well, I think with the biologics too, as a certified organic growers, we need to use biologics. And when I say biologics, it's exactly what Randy's talking about. It is a harmful spray, but it's derived from a natural ingredient, and it breaks down within 2 weeks. Within a week to 2 weeks, if you get a rain, you're going to have to spray, spray again. Yeah. So it breaks down in the environment. It's not like a synthetic, weed killer or bacteria. So. I said weed killer, but same. Synthetic weed killers don't break down. The synthetic insecticides don't break down as well. So, but I have to tell you this. So Mark's Hardware, as Randy mentioned in Bagley, you can find it in any hardware store. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Used to not be able to, but it's becoming more and more common. But Mark told Randy last summer or summer before. He said, "I have more people buying this natural Colorado potato beetle beater," is what it's called. He said, "I have more people buying that now than I do the synthetic chemicals because it's that effective." So that's good news as well.
And we like to think that people are becoming more conscientious about what they're putting in their bodies and what's going into the earth and so forth and so forth. So, but the spinosad, And you can derive some of your own skill set too, but it takes a little labor. So if you go out and allow some of these bugs to die and you go out and pick them up, you can throw them into some water and do this. Ron taught us that, but it's all labor intensive, and fast as we are working, we didn't do it, but home gardeners can, because the bacteria is in them. And what you're doing is you're multiplying it. It'll go in and it'll begin to grow inside.
Yeah, if you like chemistry and biology, you can create your own with the dead bugs. You can create your own
biological.
Yeah, your own biological pesticide. Yep. The other thing too. I know. As a home gardener again too, you have some options, and you can YouTube or just Google. There's a neem spray that you can make using neem. Neem is pretty effective against a lot of insects in the garden. Again, because of the scale we're on, we're just using the biologics that companies who are approved by organic standards. We're just using the biologics that they've gotten ready for us. But as a home gardener, I mean, you're playing, you're learning, you probably have a little more time. You can mix yourself up a neem spray and see how that works. And neem is an essential oil. So
they do have the concentrated neem oils now.
You can pick it up rather than make your own?
Yeah, it's stronger.
Okay.
It's kind of like the concentrated garlic that we have used on mosquitoes too.
Right.
We came from a highly mosquitoed area, and we would mix up concentrated garlic, and there's a couple other natural products we use, and we have pretty good luck.
Yeah, I used to say when Randy would spray the yard with the garlic concoction we had for mosquitoes, I would always say, it smells like an Italian restaurant out here, So yeah, we over the years, we're not that old, but we're kind of old. So over the years, it's we have made our own things, to address problems in the yard or problems in the garden. And now, like Randy just said, you can get neem commercially all ready to go to get sprayed in your garden. You don't have to sit and mix it up yourself, which is what I used to do. So, and I kind of miss those days. They were a little more relaxed.
Kind of like a chemistry lab.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we just threw a lot out. Which one is it? It's 5 or 6.
We didn't get into the specifics of every plant, but if people have questions about a particular plant or how to seed them, how to grow them, we're definitely open to questions on that. But it's hard to go into that because there's, I don't know how many plants there are. And we talk about this a lot, is that, it's easy to go out and figure out how to become a grain farmer or do this, and you learn 2 or 3 crops. But here we're dealing with 25, 30 different crops, and each plant probably requires a little bit of different attention to that, and different temperatures for germinating. It's all kind of,
different weather conditions it likes.
Yes,
this one loves heat, this one does not love heat. How we harvest them, how expiring, all of those things. Yeah. So we decided not to talk about specific vegetables, and then if any of you have questions, that Kate could take your questions and we can specifically address vegetables or other gardening issues.
Yeah, we tried over the years, we've tried transplanting just about everything. We've done beets, we wouldn't do that again. I've done corn to some success, but it's labor intensive. And do you get a jump on it? Maybe a week or 2, and you have to ask yourself, well, if you're a home gardener and I would just want to let my corn grow and have it when it's ready and really enjoy it, that's fine. But we're always trying to learn a few things and what works, what doesn't work. So.
Just one other thing. So nursery, starting nursery plants is a question. I'm just thinking. I just got one the other day from somebody who said, in fact, one of our CSA members called and said, I'm just not going to be able to start plants this year. I don't have enough room. I don't have enough time. Are you going to be starting any this year for the public? We've had requests over the last couple of years because we are certified organic. There are growers who want certified organic starts. So I said, this year we actually are. So I'm going to be on our website. I'm going to be putting up something we're calling the virtual greenhouse. So if any gardeners want to get certified organic plants as starts, you'll be able to order them from us. And but her in particular, I think she brings up a concern that a lot of people have, which is I would love to start my own plants, but I just do not have the space. I don't have the time. I don't really know how. I start them and they die. I want to start so many different plants, so they do look for another, greenhouse source and where to buy them. But if you have any questions about even starting plants, I mean, I was in the hothouse all day today getting things seeded. So those questions are welcome as well.
And if there's that, I guess there's maybe some fear around starting your own plants. The one thing I would say is let go of that and just go ahead and try it on a very small scale and see what happens. The only way that I know that Jill and I learned so much is trying new things and not being so worried about, oh, if it doesn't work, what happens? I mean, drop the what ifs. And, it's like an old line. Don't ask what gardening can do for me, but what can I do for gardening? And truly, I think you let go of enough to say, oh yeah, I'm going to put something into this and see what happens. I'm not worried because, I've done things that would drive Jill nuts, like starting tomatoes last year in the middle of February. It's like,
and we got tomatoes as big that were like, the weather got really bad last year about the time we were going to put them out. And so it's like, oh, they keep growing and growing, and then they're...
And spending 10 nights in the high tunnel trying to keep it warm.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we had really tomatoes, and of course, we learned a lot.
We learned a lot what you have to do.
And of course, I began to start YouTubing this and YouTubing that, and then starting to, okay, how do we get soil warm? Where do you start your plants? A window works, a window with a little hot pad, we're just fine to start some plants. In fact, I think it's kind of exciting to watch that first plant pop to the ground. That's when I get truly excited.
I never get tired of that.
It's life. It truly is just life happening.
Yeah.
And it's a miracle. And so.
It's a lot of fun. Well, maybe we should do questions then if anybody has any.
I am mouse at the ready. You can type them in or shout them out however you like. Take a sec.
I just want people to know too, we're open for questions whenever. We've got a Facebook page at Mary Gardens Farm. We've got a website, marygardensfarm.com. So you can email us or call, and we're always happy to share what we know, and if we can help, we'd like to do that.
Feel free to just shout out your questions if you want to.
Hi, this is Carrie Berg. Can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you just fine.
Hi, my 7-year-old has a question about our cucumbers. Can I ask it? Okay, our cucumbers did not grow last year, and we think it's because we started them too late because we got our entire garden going not till June. But if you have any cucumber advice, which is our favorite vegetable, please let us know. Thanks.
Thank you. First of all, you weren't too late. June is fine.
No, June is fine. In fact, we've, in our other garden, we planted them as late as the 1st of July and had some cucumbers that they're not a long growing span, depending on the variety that you have though. Certain varieties can be, I think we got 40 some days on our Corinthas, but your straight 8s and some of your traditional cucumbers should have been okay. My concern goes right into too much water or not enough water. How was the garden?
I think, what was your question about the garden? I don't think we had too much water.
Okay. What was that? Were you planted them? What did you plant the year before in that spot?
It was our first year of a garden. We had ordered a raised bed, and this will be our 2nd year with it.
Okay.
What was the soil then?
We got some soil from a gardener friend told me where to get it, and we got a dump truck, 2 dump trucks full. It was black soil. Oh, 3.
3?
Yeah, 3. I've been corrected. Axel, do you remember the name of the truck? It was the one. There were like 2 choices, and my friend was like, get the more expensive one. It has black dirt, and so I did.
Okay, so did the plant come up at all, or did it not germinate?
Oh yeah, it came up. They were just like the size of pickles.
The sugar snap peas glowed.
Yeah.
I wonder, you sure you have the correct variety? Because there are some pickling cucumbers that they could have got interchanged. The other thing I get concerned about cucumbers is too much water. And squashes, cucumbers, that family does not do well when you water the seeds too much.
Well, we did have a problem where I left the soaker hose on all night one night, so maybe that was the problem.
Did you say the plant just came up a little, or the cucumbers that came off the plant were little?
There was just the cucumbers that came off the plant were little. We just had to harvest them because it was getting to be frosty.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I don't think length of growing season was it. Somewhere it sounds like they got stressed somewhere along the line. So we've had that happen over the years with different vegetables. So I'll give you an example. So in summary, if a plant gets stressed, you might see a different output than what you expect. So we put out brassicas, again, brassicas with the kohlrabi, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels, those are all brassicas, and they're cold-loving vegetables. And it was so beautiful at the end of April last year. We put them outside, and then we got that very cold weather, and they got really, really stressed between, first of all, they are cold-loving. They can handle cold, but not only did it get too cold for too many consecutive nights, it also came with a really pack-punching wind. Oh, so windy. And those poor things were just, blowing over, and I wrote them off. I thought this crop is gone. Well, as Mother Nature has it, it wants to live, it wants to grow. So these plants did grow, but we saw something we've never seen in broccoli. And again, our friend Ron, a retired horticulturist, told us that this is what happens when plants get stressed. So the broccoli, as it was starting to form heads, it did not form a nice uniform round head like we expect broccoli to form. It started forming almost what happens after you've harvested a head of broccoli. They start forming little shoots, little itty bitty broccoli heads. And it started doing that right away. It wasn't even forming a head. It started sending out these little shoots. And I said, Ron, what's going on? He said, these little broccolis. And he said, because the plant knows the stress it went through, it doesn't have the energy to create a head of broccoli. And its most important directive is to survive. So it's shooting out these little broccolis so that they can go to seed right away. I thought that was really interesting. So I guess this is like a contest, but I'm going to conclude that that somewhere, if that sucker hose is on all night, or somewhere along the line, the plant got stressed and just didn't produce like you would expect it to.
I think so too, with some of the, depending on your soil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and of course, we lived up north and we had gumbo, so if you got a heavy rain, our plants sat in water. Where we live today, we get a heavy rain and it's gone, and you can work in the garden a few hours later. So if your drainage is poor and it's holding water and too much moisture, that could be a real factor. I would maybe next year, when you plant your cucumbers, kind of like the way we used to do it, is kind of build up a little hill, maybe a few inches, and then pack some seeds in it and give them just a little dish of water when you start, and then walk away. And I think you'll do a lot better. And as long as the temperature is okay too, cucumbers really need that. That soil should be, anywhere from 65 to 75 degrees for good germination too. That'll help some. And then maybe plant a couple extra plants, because if cucumbers we know people who eat 7, 8 of them in the morning for breakfast. So.
Another question too, did you plant them in a hill? Like you made a circle and planted 3, 4, 5 in a hill, or did you plant them one at a time down the row?
We did one at a time down the row, and we had tried to we planted them as seeds inside in little cups and then replanted them, so.
Okay, planted starts.
Well, that's a good question.
I would just say try it again this year, and think about what we said, and get on YouTube and find out what other people are saying too, and then implement some changes. Like Randy said, every year you learn something one year, something fails, and then the next year you just try some new things to see if you can get it right.
Oh yeah, well thanks, this has been really helpful. We appreciate it.
Reach out if we can help you through the season.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, we got something in the Q&A. Hi Randy, hi Jill. Herbs, mine all died last year. When should I start them, and when should I put them inside? And I have another one.
Aha, I love herbs, Randy.
Yeah, that's your thing.
Don't let him till into any planting into where I'm developing the herb garden. It depends on if you have an annual or a perennial. Obviously, if you're saying you're bringing them in, I'm thinking you have an annual that you want to keep over the winter and put back out there in the summer. Can you be specific? Maybe type back to Kate and she can tell me what herbs you're thinking about. So I've got like 5 different kinds of mints. Right now I've got some dried sage. Sage is an annual basically in our time zone, in our temperature zone. And I'm gonna harvest it because it's just leaves right now, but it smells so good still. It's all dried up, but I'm gonna put it in a great big bag, like a garbage bag, and I'm gonna throw it in when we have campfires. I'm gonna throw it in campfires. I think we'll get a nice kind of sagey smell. I grow thyme. What else do I, oh, of course, dill, you know. So is there a specific herb? In most herbs, I'll just in general say, if you're gonna bring an herb in, I bring thyme in. Herbs like sun, you know, herbs like sun. So it's gonna need to be in a sunny place, first of all. And it's gonna want water, you know, it thrives best outside. It's not a, you know, house plant, but they can do really well in a sunny window. Any herbs really can, and just keep them, you know, well watered.
Well, it's not in the chat. Oregano and basil.
If you're bringing in basil from outside, you know, it'd almost be better to kind of start it inside. Basil doesn't have a super long lifespan. So you're going to bring it in. We sell basil all summer, and we succession plant. Most of our vegetables actually we succession plant. But so basil will start to get old after 3 weeks, and then we're moving into our next succession of basil. So that could be why you can have success with basil, because they just don't last real long. Basil and thyme? Oregano. Oregano, you know, because I actually have a perennial oregano, and so I don't ever bring that in. But oregano, it's not going to fail like basil does. It's not going to have that kind of a shelf life. So I guess water and sun, it's pretty hardy, just like thyme, but they can go a long, long time, you know, being indoors. Are they in the sun? And are they getting good water?
It's good to know. Thank you.
Okay. And again, YouTube.
Yeah.
Isn't oregano the only herbs that get over?
That's in my cradle. Yeah.
This begins to root itself.
There's different kinds of oregano too, I guess I should say. You know, the oregano I have in my perennial bed, any of the oreganos you can use for, you know, culinary reasons, but there's some that are more culinary than others. I have well, actually it's not an oregano, it's a creeping thyme. Oh, I love that stuff. It's really fun. So anyway, different varieties of herbs are going to act differently too. So.
Anything else, anybody? No other questions thus far.
My name is Martin Gies, Marcia's husband.
Martin and Marcia Gies.
Hello.
Hi.
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 So we're veteran gardeners, but we're going to be starting raised beds, and it's the first time we've gardened this far north. My question has to do with what you recommend for soil testing and who does soil testing in this region. We're going to start with a blend of mulch and black dirt and decayed manure, but I need a feedback from you on how to handle the soil testing component.
Well, we had our soil tested, you know, first when we were on the farm. We had through extension. So it's the extension office in Bagley is where we got our soil testing kit. University of Minnesota, will they send you out something?
Yeah,
I think,
they do.
yeah, they send it out, right?
They send out little bags. You take wherever you want your soil tested done.
Yeah.
Take it and fill a bag, and then you mark it where it came from, and then make sure that you label or write it down in your own records so that you know where to go back to.
NDSU, I think, offers soil testing.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing that you had mentioned is bringing manure in. And there's been a few, 2 or 3 people that I know that actually got manure from people who do cattle. And there's this chemical they're using in pastures that actually kills weeds in the pasture, allows grasses to grow, and of course your cattle are eating it, and that develops your manure. They bring it onto the gardens and nothing grows. So be careful where you're getting your manure from, because I forgot the name of the chemical, but your garden, it'll take 5-6 years before your garden will grow again. So I'm really cautious in where you get your manure. So just be really, just safeguard yourself. And
That's really good to know. Maybe an addendum question would be, we are north of Bemidji on essentially sandy soils, and so we're going to start with raised beds. Are we going to be more apt, do you think, to need more alkaline supplement? Do we need to put lime into the mix, or is it more apt that we're going to need a little more acidic stuff?
well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think your soil test will tell you for sure. I wouldn't add anything until you get your soil tested. It depends on how sandy. You got some loam mixed into that. I don't think there's any gumbo here. We used to garden in gumbo. I don't think they deal with that here.
No,
I haven't heard anybody.
no.
Clay. People are telling us how they're gardening in clay. So where your pH is going to be at is
Probably one of the best things you can do is if you know somebody who has peat, so you have raised beds, so getting a good peat compost, that's going to be some pretty balanced pHs already. Like our garden in Roseau, I think I hauled 10 truckloads in to fill in the back once when we realized that it needed work. But if you can get to, like my neighbor too, he digs up peat. And I think you'll find some areas around here that people are digging up peat and storing it. And I think a good peat has a lot of organic material in it. And with that organic material, it also keeps your nitrogen levels at a balanced level, because you can throw a lot of organic material into it. And of course, to break down that organic material, it takes up nitrogen, but it gives it back at the end. So it's really important that you have that life there to start with. And then of course, most raised beds there's plenty of good drainage. And you're going to find that making sure that they're watered, ample, plenty of water. And a lot of times what I would do at a raised bed today, having had a few, I definitely would run myself a little drip tape or a soaker hose and turn it on once in a while, and not a lot, but just because a raised bed, it just needs it all the time. And your pH, again, depending on what you're going to grow, but typically, between that 6.5 and 7 is going to be, that number is going to be really good.
Yeah, well, I think it sounds to me like you're an experienced gardener, so you know what level you need to be at. But if you're truly going to grow in a raised bed and you have to put in a peat mix or a black soil mix or something, it's gonna be pretty balanced just in and of itself. But like you said, once you start incorporating that sandy soil, then that's gonna probably change things a bit. I'm just gonna tell you a story here. We're friends with the Amish community just west of Bagley and in that Langley area. We're pretty good friends with a couple families there. And one of the young Amish man, he was living in Wisconsin, just moved up here about a year ago, bought a farm, and it's gonna start to grow some things in it. But he had a soil tested first to see where it was at. And the pH was way off because it's been chemically farmed. Yeah, Randy took a look at the soil test results, and it had like 6% organic materials in it. It was really a very depleted soil. So he wants to jumpstart, the fertility of his soil. So he was gonna pick up at Fleet Farm just bags and bags, a couple thousand pounds of lime.
15 tons.
Yeah, because his pH was so off. But that's because the soil has been depleted through chemical farming. So typically, if your soil hasn't been depleted through chemical farming or some other kind of way in which the soil's been misused, typically you throw some black soil on it, maybe a little manure, clean manure, you're going to be okay. You don't have to get into a bunch of fancy testing. But if you have question, you start throwing that sand up and stuff, then you might want to have it tested. So that's,
and a good compost pile too. That definitely helps.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
It's so fun. It's as much fun for us talking with you guys as it is, for us to share what we know, because those of us who are passionate about gardening, we
And-
just love to
And
talk about it.
truly, we know that as much as we've grown, we're still learning. There are people
Yes.
who we know that have been doing this at a level that we do for 40, 50 years. And, I know some big Terry Bennett, we're gonna sit down and have coffee and talk about it. He wants to know more about lettuce, and I want to know more about certain things.
Right.
I think getting out and networking as much as you can and then seeing what works for you. Because every farm has a little uniqueness to it, and how you do things, what fits you as a gardener is not necessarily going to fit somebody else. I mean,
Yeah, and I think too, another fun thing about gardening and farming is, so you've got all your great university information. There's some amazing stuff universities have been doing when it comes to, we have high tunnels and greenhouses, so we learned so much from what universities have been doing and how to do things. So there's just this vast amount of modern resources that really gives information that can help us be more successful. At the same time, if I have a question about a vegetable in particular, I'll call my grandma, who's 99 years old, and I'll say, how did you do it? And then she'll say, well, my mom used to do it this way. So we're going back, into the, 150 years ago, where this information has been passed along, 200 years ago, I might even say. So it's really, that might be the best wisdom. Forget all the modern science. They learned from doing. It's like Einstein said, if you want to understand science, study nature. So there are some things, some wisdoms that we should be sharing with each other, just from traditions in our own families and people we know, stuff that universities just overlook or just simply don't know about. So.
That makes sense. I had one addendum question. You had mentioned the name Mark. Was it Abor who does harvesting of peat, or who? Did I get the name right there?
Somebody, Carrie would ask a question. Somebody had asked a question earlier about where they've gotten the soil. Yeah. Was that name familiar?
Carrie, you were asking about cucumbers?
Yeah.
and,
Maybe she could type, Carrie, if you're there, maybe type the name of that.
and getting to your raised garden too, there's so much opportunity when you can keep your gardening to that level. I mean, just heating your soil in the spring, you can use solarization, or you can also do some canopies, to get your plants started. And getting back to the cucumber thing too, sometimes certain areas and low-level areas are a little cooler, and cucumbers they're a heat-loving plant. And sometimes that early start, if you have a little canopy or remay it, which will give you a few degrees difference, and even keeping it out of the strong winds sometimes can make a difference too. But yeah, Jill and I often laugh sometimes if we just went back to our regular gardening and get more into some raised garden beds. I think first of all, I think as we age, it's a great way to do work, and ergonomically, it would be a lot easier. And I think you can actually grow pretty well. We grew quite a few garlic in our first year growing in a raised garden bed. I made it out of oak logs. And I think we had a really nice small crop of garlic, probably our best crop so far, even today. But yeah, there's so many things to do. I think it's what you're interested in and what your skills are at. I think that's where you have to take it. It's kind of think about who you are before you really jump into something and say, oh, I'm not sure if I'm mechanically capable of doing this or not, or what are my interests and how big do I want my garden? All those questions are basically who you are, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and as we're getting closer to 6:30, I want to invite you, if you want to, visit our Facebook page, at Muir Gardens Farm, muirgardensfarm.com. But mostly the big invite is, please contact us if you have questions, or if you learned something cool and new and hey, this worked, I want to let you guys know, because I know you talk to people and we just want to keep sharing our gardening wisdom with each other and gardening stories. The invitation also includes coming and visiting the farm if you ever want to. I think most people are pretty interested. If you're a gardener, it's really fun to see just this, all of these rows of vegetables just growing out in the field. And organic gardening does take a little more work, but it's the way we used to farm. And your hands are getting dirty. You're not just looking at your Google Drive calendar to see, is it 3 weeks after this was planted and now I just automatically spray? There's a lot of hands-on contact and communication relationship with the earth and the plants and the cycles and the sun. And, so I'm talking to the crowd. I mean, you guys know that gardening is more than just producing some food, something that happens in our hearts and in our souls when we garden. So you're welcome to come to the farm and feel that. Our farm definitely has that feel, I think.
And a sidekick tour is that we have some really hairy pigs that are really rare. And I think we get more laughs watching them sometimes.
They're called a Mangalitsa hog, and Randy loves these Mangalitsas, and they are funny. They will make you laugh.
Yeah, they do. So, well, thank you guys for coming. It's been our pleasure too to be here.
Absolutely.
It's really wonderful. Thank you both.
Thank you,
Kate, on Harmony.
Yeah.
And thanks to Harmony, who continues to outreach into the community like this and bring us all together.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the delicious vegetables.
You're so welcome.
All right, any last minute questions? Otherwise, I think that's about it. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise, says Cheryl.
Oh, Cheryl,
You're
thank you.
very welcome.
Thank
Cheryl.
you. We are
Yes,
so
thank you
welcome.
all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Virtually.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, take care.
All right, thank you.